So welcome, my name is David Malin, and this is about to be the team we call CS50 R&D. As many of you know, CS50 is one of our undergraduate classes here at the college. It happens to be the largest now here at Harvard, and somehow also the largest at Yale University. But more on that in just a bit. Before we transition to focusing on the R&D activities that underlie this course known as CS50 and its student bodies, we thought we'd give you a glimpse at the class itself, thanks to CS50's production team, who put together this sizzle reel for our incoming freshmen when they were here just a couple of months ago for the so-called Visitas weekend. So we give you CS50. This is CS50, Harvard University's introduction to the intellectual enterprises of computer science and the arts of programming. We got the keys to open paradise, yeah, paradise. Now let's go walking hand in hand. Come on, baby, we can hit.
If you walked in here today, you'd see hundreds of people crowded around their laptops, smiling, laughing, thinking.
Bedtime.
So while CS50 was once a course, a fall semester course only at that, it's now become, in our minds, more of an umbrella term of any number of educational, technological, and video-oriented experiments and research developments that will all go on behind the scenes thanks to CS50's team. I happen to keep a foot both in the engineering school, in DCE, as do many members of our team live in both of those worlds, and ultimately the goal of CS50 R&D, our so-called skunk work, is for things we incubate, things we develop, to graduate, so to speak, from our labs and be used ultimately by DCE at large, by FAS at large, if not the broader world. So toward that end, here is a snapshot of our team. In total, during the fall semester especially, we're about 100 persons strong. Many of them are undergraduate teaching fellows and course assistants, but also underlying the team is a full-time team pictured here at left, who are either graduate students or full-time staff here at CS and at DCE. And on the right, many of our undergraduates, some of them are here in the audience today, who are joining us for the summer, during which we make one of our biggest pushes in anticipation of the coming year's activities. Allow me to take a back seat for a moment and have the team each introduce themselves to give you a better sense of who works on what and from whence they came.
Hi guys, I'm Ian Sexton. I work on the production team. I come from a filmmaking background and sort of joined the team to elevate the video production.
Hi, I'm Lauren Scully, go by Scully. I joined the team last year, so I'm going into my second year, and I am on the production team.
I'm Dan Coffey. I came from DCE originally, working with Rod and his team of producers. I joined the team in 2012, having taken CS50 in 2010, and I'm excited to be here. I'm on the production team.
Hi, my name is Doug Lloyd. I was an undergrad here at the college. I graduated class 2009. Now I'm a preceptor in computer science at DCE. I work on curriculum development for CS50, as well as managing CS50 AP, our high school outreach effort.
Hi everyone, I'm Dan Armdaris. I'm preceptor of computer science at the School of Engineering, but I've interacted with many of you through some of the courses that I've taught at DCE as well, and I work on software development at CS50 R&D.
Hi guys, my name is Colton Ogden. I've been with CS50 for about 3 years. I'm a full-time technologist. I do server-side development stuff, music stuff, office stuff, just miscellaneous stuff. So glad to see you guys.
Hey, my name is Christian Saravia. I am originally from Guatemala. I joined the CS50 team around a month ago. I'll be focusing mostly on outreach and working with teachers and students around the world who want to bring CS50 to their communities or their learning institutions.
Hi everyone, my name is Arturo Real. I'm originally from Venezuela, and actually a year ago yesterday began taking CS50 in Miami. So after finishing the class, I joined, much like Christian, a month ago, and we'll be working with logistics and production.
And that's a perfect segue. We thought we'd give you just a bit of context as to the various forms in which CS50 works. And even though it is ultimately a class and an academic experience for students, it has also, bigger picture for us, been a wonderful test bed, a wonderful place to experiment with new ideas, new technologies, new pedagogical approaches. And indeed, today, the course exists here at Harvard with about 800 students here on campus and an additional 300 students who take the course through DCE, either in the fall or in the spring semester. We had 350 students for the first time this past fall at Yale as part of a 3-year experiment that we're just now entering year 2 of, whereby we hold most of the course's lectures here and on campus, but we've hired a team of teaching fellows and course assistants in New Haven who lead sections, hold weekly office hours, hold weekly CS50 lunches, their own CS50 fair, and so the course is truly one and the same on both campuses running in parallel. Beyond that, we also have a variant of the class that's offered. This is a glimpse of week 0 here at Harvard and here at Yale. We also have across the river HBS, a 90-student class called literally CS50 for MBAs, which is more of a top-down class as opposed to a bottom-up. And by that I mean whereas the college students and the cross-ranger students and the extension students here in CS50 in its original form really get their hands dirty and really immerse themselves in the hands-on aspect of computer science and of programming, of spending hours and hours actually building things. At the business school, we take more of a top-down approach, talking about things more conceptually, empowering the students ultimately to hold their own, so to speak, in a conversation with engineers. But it was actually HBS and the introduction of MBA students some years ago into CS50, whereby some years ago for the first time, MBA students could take CS50 on this side of the river for actual MBA credits that motivated much of the technological work that we've since done. In large part thanks to Dan Coffey and the production team have we started live streaming, for instance, all of the course's lectures. And originally, the very simple use case there was to enable some 90, or rather some dozen or two students at HBS to actually engage with the course in real time without having to cross the river for logistical and scheduling purposes. But since then, has the course also grown? As Arturo alludes to here, into CS50X. We were the first college class to be offered through edX, the MOOC collaboration between Harvard and MIT, UC Berkeley, and now others. We have some 700,000 registrants through the MOOC, whereby not everyone certainly engages, but any number of students are looking to pivot in life professionally, fill in gaps in their knowledge, try their hand at problem solving more generally in computer science. But most excitingly, have we begun to nurture relationships and partnerships with all sorts of universities and friends in the nonprofit and educational worlds. Arturo comes to us from Miami-Dade College, where thanks to a nonprofit called Launch Code, have we had a number of cohorts on the order of several hundred students now taking CS50 with a local support structure in Miami, watching the course's lectures, having their own local sections, working together on office hours on problem sets, all independently. Has that local support structure really characterized what otherwise would have been an online experience only. And Launch Code, in turn, has expanded to several other cities in the US. We've increasingly started working with folks abroad, most recently in Bolivia, Chile, the Netherlands, and Ukraine, with a few others to come. And the models we've adopted in these various places have differed. Sometimes we're very involved, sometimes we're not really involved, but increasingly has it been exciting to have these local support structures with which students can actually succeed irrespective of their prior background or lack thereof. And indeed, some of the first such students to succeed, so Arturo among them here, were our friends in Miami-Dade College and our friend Sadi Kulthum in the middle, who's been the local instructor down at Miami-Dade. And lastly, as Doug alluded, is CS50 AP. Long story short, and you'll hear more about this soon, CS50 now makes itself available as an adaptation for high school teachers and students. And indeed, whereas the course has been open courseware, freely available online thanks to the support of Henry Leitner and others through DCE since 2007, most recently have we shifted our focus from focusing only on student-facing resources to teacher-facing resources and empowering teachers to adopt or adapt this particular course in some form and leaning on a place like Harvard and our resources in order to elevate their own student classes that might not otherwise be possible. And pictured here for among our 40 high schools and 1,500 students who are currently involved in a pilot program are some of our initial teachers who came to campus some months ago for a hands-on workshop with which to begin to teach the course. And pictured here are some of our high school students, 8 public and private high schools in New York who gathered some months ago for a local CS50 hackathon in Manhattan. But without further ado, here now is CS50 R&D. In prepping for today, we thought we'd pluck a few examples that draw upon the software world, the academic world, to the production world to give you a sense of what's been going on behind the scenes, what's in the pipeline for the future. We brought some demonstrations with which to play afterward if you'd like to linger. And at any point, please feel free to interject. And I thought I would introduce just one of these myself before turning the reins over. Video 50, several years ago, was the first such internal initiative that we started on that was really designed to graduate from our labs to Jody's team and to James's team and to DCE more generally, so as to have a new and improved video player for students to use online. What it looked like in CS50's flavor was a multi-video interface whereby on the left you would see whoever the human subject was teaching the class. On the right, you would see, albeit not very well on this projector, a secondary screen that was captured digitally from the teacher's laptop so that a student now in online form can toggle between these screens, can zoom in on either of them, but can generally have access to much more information, as much information as the students in class did, as opposed to leaving it only to the judgment of the person shooting the video as to when a student might actually want to look at that. In addition, quite popular among college students, it seems, is 2x playback speed, if not 3x playback speed. So those kinds of things are supported as well. Full text transcript, searchability. And what was wonderfully exciting to us was when Jody's team took this on and actually continued the development of the code, integrating it ultimately into DCE's own Matterhorn efforts. Allow me to turn next now to something that our production team has taken the lead on, which is our so-called CS50 Course in a Box.
All right, hello, I'm Dan Coffey again on the production team. And so in coming into CS50 in 2012, we were starting on the production team with one camcorder, and we'd shoot the screen and we'd shoot the instructor, and there's a lot of whipping back and forth. And so every year we've tried to iterate on our production value and up our game, and in recent years we've really done quite a bit towards that end. One of the things that we've worked on this past year is our Course in a Box, and for those who are unfamiliar, this is our live streaming encoding switcher, and it's actually running up in the back if you'd like to see it. We're cutting this presentation together so you get multiple feeds into your switch, and then you can cut between them and stream at the same time. It's meant to be a very portable unit. I know Rod's team was using one, maybe still. More recently this year, what we've done is switch to this setup, and this is just a complicated picture of all the hardware involved, but we took a switcher, which can take 20 inputs, hooked up a some logging software and a control surface, and the goal is that when we go shoot CS50 lectures, we can have X number of inputs. At the end of the day, we can bring it into Adobe Premiere, and we have recut in our sequence exactly what we cut on the fly. So instead of having to go and recut every lecture like we used to do, we can actually just do some fine tuning. We can mark where we made mistakes, and voila, via this logging software, we get to see exactly where the cuts were made, and it really sped up our workflow quite a bit.
Then the motivation for that one, to be clear, was the very simple use case of we now suddenly had a dozen or two MBA students across the river. It just wasn't feasible for them to maintain their current schedule and commute across the river just for CS50. So the design goal at hand was simply enable these students to take the course in real time, at least in terms of its lectures. We originally used Harvard's default system, Beyond DCE, for that. Had, frankly, a number of failures, and the end user experience was not quite what we wanted it to be, and we were sort of pushing our luck, I think, with the MBA students if we couldn't actually allow them to tune in. And so I think my idea that I floated to Dan is, why don't we do this ourselves? And thus began a wonderfully exciting exploration of how we might do this ourselves.
Yeah, and that was back in the early days before you could just turn on YouTube and stream. So it was a lot of figuring it out along the way.
So the setup for the next tool that the production team has dived into in various increasing versions over the past few years is what we call Capture 50. As some of you may know, at FAS, there's the so-called Box Center, which is designed to empower teaching fellows and faculty to teach better. And one of the services they've long offered for some 20+ years is micro-teaching, whereby FAS faculty can bring his or her teaching fellows into a classroom upstairs in the Science Center and have that section be filmed so that the teaching fellow can then sit down with his or her instructor, as well as from a mentor from the Box Center, and get pedagogical feedback. What did you do well? What did you not do well? In CS50, unfortunately, we have some 60 teaching fellows and 60 sections, and so the sheer logistics of getting all those people into the Box Center wasn't really tenable. The vision for this also coincided with the financial crisis of 2008, and so doing things at low cost were of great interest. And so the goal that we set for ourselves was to, at very low cost, very low fixed cost, could we start to capture all of CS50 sections in real time, day to day, without having to bring the staff to some central location, and do it ideally at zero marginal cost. And the gauntlet was thus thrown down, and the team came up with Capture 50.
Yeah, so Capture 50, as David explained, was just to capture every section for every student with roughly 60 sections happening per week, about an hour and a half per section. It's a lot of video, and you can probably imagine what it would take to actually hire videographers to show up and set up their cameras and whatnot. So the first iteration of this project was just simply a security camera that was streaming its bits over RTSP back to a central server, which recorded them and then turned that video around and uploaded it to YouTube. So once the hardware was in place, there was zero cost to actually implement this. This past year, we've iterated on that, and we've gone up a little bit more in cost hardware-wise to this camera. But what this camera has is control via JavaScript, so we can control presets and have it jump around based on a schedule. And this is all scheduled with Google Calendar, so there's very little overhead to actually set this up. In tandem with that is the Epiphan Pearl, and we've collaborated with DCE on this as well. I know you guys use the pearls for your distance education. And so in Maxwell Dworkin, in several rooms, we have the Epiphan Pearl, a little audio mixer, this camera, and it kicks on and off based on the Google Calendar. It then sends the file to our central server, which uploads it to YouTube, and then emails out a link to anybody who's on the calendar invite. And the end result is pretty nice, because instead of having to shoot the presenter and have the cameras pan up and get the screen, or just simply get a wide shot like we did in version 1, we can get, we still have our wide shot of the presenter down front, but you also get this higher quality image on the side of the actual presenter's computer if they have it. And so this year, we've introduced a couple of different improvements, one of which it will auto-toggle between the presenter and the laptop if they have a laptop. So if there's no laptop, it'll just be the computer screen, or just be the camera. And if they have a laptop plugged in, it'll jump to both. So that's one of the improvements we've made this year. And again, for 60 sections every week for an hour and a half, it's been a nice return for students to actually watch their sections, and for section leaders to get feedback from other section leaders and their students. All at zero overhead. Like the biggest pain in the butt is scheduling the whole thing at the beginning of the term when you log into Google Calendar and create 60 recurring events. But after you're done that, it runs itself for the rest of the term. Knock on wood.
And so then each year have we tried to up our game, so to speak. It's been important to me for us to focus, I think, atypically on production value, certainly more so than online courses generally internationally have focused, really to try to lower the mental barrier for students between where they're physically seated and what they're experiencing. And we have the fortune in CS50 to have as our stage, literally Sanders Theater stage, this beautiful space that we ideally want to transport as best we can virtually our students into that space. And so really helping the students forget that they're actually sitting at home watching on a laptop or nowadays watching on a TV has been of great importance to us. And so as technological trends have changed, among them resolution, how many pixels you can fit on the screen, so have our own aspirations. And thus was born a couple of years back, CS50 4K.
Yeah, so when I came into CS50, like I said, we're using one camcorder, and we were streaming in 1080p. Actually, we were streaming in 720p, but recording in 1080p, which is a pretty high resolution, not too bad. But as the trends continue with TV sizes growing and the resolution of those TVs growing, we wanted to be on the cutting edge. So 2 years ago, we started a conversation with Red Digital Cinema Camera Company and got 2 of their cameras into Sanders Theater. And just to give a screenshot from our recording, we also have moved to this widescreen aspect ratio, much like traditional cinema. And the goal is to really go beyond a lecture capture where people just expect like a wide shot of a room and really kind of bring you to the space and shoot it in a much more high-end kind of way. And one of the other benefits if you're shooting in a higher resolution than your deliverable resolution, so if you're shooting in 4K and delivering in 1080p, is that you get to crop in, especially on a white background. So you get 2 shots for the price of 1. So when we do our walkthroughs with our walkthrough leader, Zamila here, who's actually shooting right now as we speak, you get to punch in from this shot to this shot at no cost, and the eye line doesn't jump. So in the past when we've done this, we've had like 2 cameras next to each other, and the talent is making eye contact with just one camera. And so we've simplified the process using just one camera, shooting at a 6K resolution and delivering at a 4K resolution, so you get the 2 shots in one. I mentioned that we started a relationship with the Red Digital Cinema Company, and so 2 years ago we brought in the Scarlets, and this last year we moved to 2 epic dragons. And just to insert a quick joke, this is the first image search that came up when I searched for epic dragon. But this is the epic dragon in its simplest form. It's a Super 35 high-end cinema camera. It shoots at, I believe, 240 frames per second at max speed. We shoot at just 24 frames per second, but it's got a really great dynamic range. And if any of you shoot on a DSLR and shoot photos and you shoot in RAW format, you get the benefit of a lot of extra data so that you can recover highlights, you can bring up shadow areas, you can change color temperature. And the beauty of this camera is that you get all that in video format, so you get to mess around later if you don't quite nail it in production, which of course we do. And the data rates on it are very reasonable. It shoots in a compressed RAW format, and so our data rates for each camera are not that much bigger than a typical ProRes for the people in the room who know what that is. A ProRes LT even, it's about the same size as that for great quality. I mentioned 6K, so these cameras do actually do 6K. Again, jumping up from 4K to 6K, we primarily shoot in 4K, but in cases where we want to have two shots in one, we shoot in 6K and then deliver in 4K, jumping between the two. This is what the camera looks like. This is Clyde, one of our two primary cameras with a giant cinema lens on the front, and this is to give us the range of covering a live event, because for most live events you might use a camera like the one that's set up here, a camcorder. It's much easier to run, especially when you've got a group like this who you don't know who's going to jump in and start talking. But with this lens and this camera, we've been able to kind of recreate the same on the high-end digital cinema side. And we just recently acquired 5 total of these. So this year, I'm very happy to say, in CS50, we are going to be able to shoot in 30K if we want to. And that's 6K times 5 if you're curious. We won't actually shoot in that many Ks, but we will be shooting primarily in 4K, and we'll have 5 angles to jump between. And the other thing we're really looking to up the production value with this year is this device called the Movi. If you've seen it before, it's a giant gimbal. It stabilizes. Is there a question? Stretching. Okay. It's a giant gimbal that stabilizes a camera, and what's really cool about this is you can put it on the end of a jib, which is just a giant camera arm like this. And swing it around. So you've got these giant sweeping shots if you've ever watched like awards shows or whatnot. So we're going to bring one of these, a 12 or 16-foot jib, into Sanders Theater this year to shoot lectures, which we're very excited about. And what's really cool about the Movi on there is that you can control it by putting the controller on a tripod and flipping on what's called mimic mode. And so the operator who's operating the camera simply uses it like it's a tripod camera, but the Movi up on the arm actually moves and mimics the movement of the person who's operating it. So it's very simple to operate with 2 people. So basically we're going to take this and put it into Sanders like this and up our production game. So we're very excited about that this year. So look for CS50 and 30K this fall. And let me turn things back over to David.
And so what's been an interesting side effect is each time we sort of ramp up on one side of things, is there this side effect or new problems that arise. And indeed, one of the things we've worked on for the past several years that now is a workflow DCE has transitioned to is using the so-called cloud. So we've been using, thanks to grants from Amazon, Amazon Web Services for some number of years, using things called virtual machines, where our servers for years now have no longer lived on campus, but live somewhere else in places owned by Amazon. And for our data storage as well, Amazon offers something called a CDN, or Content Delivery Network, to which we can essentially upload all of our files so that they bear the burden and ultimately the cost of lots of users simultaneously hitting the site. Increasingly have we been using YouTube as well, because we make everything freely available anyway. And so YouTube now supports 4K. They support any number of other features that we leverage as well. And so it's been very exciting and problem solving to rely on these new technologies. And so I think what's been especially fun for many of us, in that some of us have worn very academic hats or very production-centric hats or very software-centric hats, is that there's constantly this intersection whereby one world solves another world's problems. And indeed, one of the things we've been very excited about over the past year is in one of those software worlds. So for many years, CS50 used nice.fas.harvard.edu. If some of you remember the old school days of email and computing on campus, that we eventually replaced with the same kind of environment in Amazon's cloud environment. So we were no longer using FAS servers, but Amazon servers. But then a few years after that, we realized, as we made the course open courseware, freely available, downloadable for anyone on the internet, that we really weren't meeting them halfway. It was very much, the onus was very much on the students online, not the extension students registered, but rather anyone on the internet to figure out, how do I make my Mac or PC behave like the server David and the class are using? And so we instead invested time into something called a virtual machine, or a CS50 appliance. This was a free piece of software that anyone on the internet could now download, and it gave them, in a window on their Mac or PC, the illusion that they had exactly the same environment that our college and extension school students had on their own Macs and PCs. And as a wonderful coincidence, just a couple of years thereafter, edX was born between Harvard and MIT, for which we volunteered as the first class. And it was only because we had just so happened to have invested time-wise and technologically into this technology that we were able to scale suddenly from roughly 1,000 students on campus to 40,000 students off campus over the course of just several months. And that same coincidence, amazingly, has happened again. We decided about 2 years ago to transition away from the client-side virtual machine, which, as nice as it is, requires a lot of disk space, a lot of CPU cycles, so to speak. It's pretty heavyweight for students to use and to download. We started to transition to a web-based environment so that you no longer needed to download anything. You could just open a browser and go to a URL at which all of your CS50 programming environment awaited. And that's entirely thanks to Dan Armendariz here and our development team, past and present, which, as we'll see, has wonderfully now served a new audience among our AP teachers altogether.
So this iteration is called the CS50 IDE, and IDE stands for the Integrated Development Environment. It's kind of a common term among programmers, and it's really one of the things that students interact with the most in their time at CS50. It's not only just the production videos and everything, but when they actually need to do their work, this is the software, the environment that they actually are writing their programs and doing their work. And so thanks to our production team, we have this lovely photo of them actually using this software, which is actually pretty great. But this is built on, I can't take all the credit for this, I just happened to find the company called Cloud9 that created the initial product. And they're a company out of Amsterdam and San Francisco that we started communicating with a couple of years ago, trying to find out if they would be interested in working with us to release a version for the classroom. The version that they had was very specific to professional developers, and we wanted to provide an experience that was scaffolded a little bit, made it a little bit simpler for those students that are coming into CS50 without any prior experience, or even those that do come into it but want a relatively simple experience. And so this is, as David mentioned, a purely online. You can just use a web browser to log into this piece of software. And Cloud9 developed a version that looks like this, or this is just a screenshot of one of the versions, and it's called a workspace. And underneath the hood, out in the cloud, there is effectively just a Linux computer that's running and devoted to an individual user, which means that a user has full control over that machine, has full control over the files of that machine, so that the user can write their programs in the editor in the top right. They can interact by using text commands via the terminal in the lower right, and they can see all the files that they're working on the left side there. And some of the stuff that we worked with Cloud9 in order to do was to simplify the UI just a little bit. So from this version, we moved to this version where we simplified not only the screen that was presented to students at the onset, but also simplified some of the menus, changed some of the buttons to simpler text, to more approachable text, just to make this a little bit easier for everyone involved. And so, although this is purely online, we had a survey in the first version that, or actually a couple of years ago, before we decided to switch to this, we surveyed the students to find out how many would actually have full online access as they were working on their problem sets. And at the time, 90% said that they would have full access to the internet while they were working on their problem sets. But we found in practice that the other 10% really didn't have any problems accessing the internet, even though they were worried about that. But even so, we have an offline version available as well, where people can still download the full version onto their local computer and be able to interact with this exact same environment without needing to have internet access, and that's been really useful. And one of the benefits, I think, of this is that this no longer requires the installation of any software, which actually has been coincidentally a big boon for one of our other initiatives, which Doug will talk about in a little bit. But for those people that cannot install software, that cannot download large amounts of data over the internet, this has been a great way for them to start developing without having to install any of that software. This is something that we've worked to, along with Cloud9, we've worked to build in support for Harvard keys, so anyone who has Harvard key access can actually go to cs50.io, use your Harvard key, and you'll be able to create one of these for free. It just happens automatically, and you'll be able to interact with this. And so we've been opening this up to some other classes as well. Although we only started it for the first time this past year, we're going to start opening it up as well to some other classes as we continue to work on polishing and streamlining that experience.
So just about a year ago, I realized that what had been in progress for some 5 years was this new curriculum called AP Computer Science Principles, which is being rolled out this coming year by the College Board of SAT and AP course fame. Unlike AP CSA, which has been an AP course that long exists, Advanced Placement, which is a very Java-centric, a very language-specific centric class, AP CS Principles is meant to be a broader course about the fundamentals of computer science, about problem solving more generally, that's language agnostic, and that any number of courses can ultimately implement. And around that same time, a year ago, did I get to chatting with CS50's own Doug Lloyd, as well as from some friends of Microsoft, all of whom were coincidentally interested at that moment in time in doing whatever we could for K-12 education. And as I mentioned before, to date, we had really been focused primarily on student-facing resources and support structure and tools. And we, as a course, pivoted a year ago to continue to maintain those same assets for students, but to start to invest heavily time-wise and effort-wise into teacher-facing resources to help teachers, especially at the secondary school level and even middle school level now, stand up their own computer science classrooms for the first time. And we've spun that under the umbrella of what's called CS50 AP.
So as David mentioned, CS50 AP sort of is our foray into more broader outreach efforts. It's our initial focus on providing those resources to teachers. And this has, my colleague Christian has really picked up a lot of international outreach efforts from teachers who have seen what we're doing with CS50 AP and want to also further adapt it to different languages as well. So this has been a great opportunity to explore that side of CS50 that has always been this institutional knowledge that we just carry from year to year, and really putting it out for anybody to pick up. As David mentioned, the course is modeled on AP Computer Science Principles, which is a new College Board course. It is a framework course as opposed to a strict curriculum course, which means that us, along with our friends from Berkeley, Code.org, there are about 9 or 10 different groups that are implementing this exact course, and it can be done in different ways. It's language agnostic, which makes for a very interesting getting ready for the AP exam for students. As David mentioned, the course has been in development for, the CS Principles course has been in development for several years, although we got into the game just pretty quickly. I've been a TF for the course since 2007, and I went to graduate school and I became an attorney, and I became very dissatisfied with it, and I wanted to leave and transition to education. And I was going to do exactly this. I was going to take CS50 and try and port it into a high school setting. And as David mentioned, sort of the stars just aligned with everybody wanting to do this at the same time. And so when I started at DCE full-time in May, this was going to be my charge in CS50. So we started the course in April or May of 2015. I worked on a just-in-time rollout over the last school year, so I was staying a couple months ahead of the teachers as they were teaching our first pilot group of students over the last school year, and they just wrapped up. Or are just wrapping up now. Our pilot year began in September of last year. Right now we're going through the process of curriculum revision, so taking all of the work that we've done over the past year, taking the feedback from teachers into account, feedback from students into account, and trying to iterate to make the course better and better. And also going through the process of getting endorsement from College Board, which would basically mean that any teacher would very easily be able to pick up this course. If they can just basically click a button on the College Board website when they're registering their course as an AP course and say, I'm using CS50 to teach this course. We're going through that right now. The CS Principles course has been in pilot, as I said, for about 5 or 6 years. And the first official year of the course starts in September, so we had an opportunity to get 1 year of pilot data and iterate on that. And students will be taking the AP exam at the end of the next school year. So we still have a very busy year ahead of us, but a lot of the groundwork has been laid for us to hopefully have some success this coming school year. So in our pilot so far, this is what the pilot program basically looks like, where we are currently located. So the red dots on this map are teachers that are currently using CS50's curriculum in a course. It's not an AP course right now because the course has not officially begun until this coming September. And the blue dots there are teachers that have come to one of our teacher training workshops where we spend 3 days, usually over a weekend, instructing teachers on the pedagogy behind CS50. Obviously, all of our resources have been available online for many years. This is where we basically give the teachers a teaching fellow training, how to run a classroom and so on. I'll go into that in a minute. So in the United States, we've had a lot of interest. Obviously, we're in the United States, so we would most likely start here. But as you can see, we actually just came from the UK a couple weeks ago, so we have some interest now building in Western Europe. And really, we're kind of we're growing, so we're optimistic that things will continue to grow in the coming year. This year, we had 39 schools with about 1,600 students. And if the ratio of teachers who came to a workshop and then implemented the course the following year pans out, I don't know why that went away, we will hopefully be in about 115 schools next year, serving about 4,500 or more students. So it's very exciting to be getting in on this, on the ground floor of this CS Principles Initiative. The curriculum is exactly the same as what we teach here at CS50. We basically asked ourselves the question, where do we want to set the bar? And if you're given a choice between setting the bar low and setting the bar high, set the bar high, and students will rise to meet the expectations that you set for them. And so we don't water anything down, we don't dumb anything down. It's exactly the same curriculum. The only advantage that the high school students have is time. So at the college and through DCE, when students take the class at the extension school, they get 12 to 13 weeks to go through a pretty intensive curriculum. High school students have the advantage of time. They have 30 to 36 weeks to go through everything. The teachers can spend a lot more time iterating on the course's various topics, diving really deep into it and giving students hopefully a more well-rounded understanding of these topics. That if we had the luxury of that time, we would also spend more time each week on these various topics. So our teacher training workshops, this is what we've been doing quite a bit of lately. Over the last year and coming up later this summer, we'll have done 7 of these workshops. We just came from London, as I mentioned. We've done 2 here in Cambridge. We were in Seattle, Redmond, early in 2015. We had one in Washington, D.C., and then later this year in San Diego and in Baltimore. So opportunities for teachers to meet with us and learn a little bit about what goes into CS50. At the core of what we talk about is this notion, sort of our mantra for CS50 AP, which is, do you want to adopt the course or do you want to adapt the course? Do you want to take the lecture materials that we have and we've organized and the problem sets that we have, do you just want to use those outright, play lecture videos in class and then spend your time in class rather with small group sessions working with students, or do you want to adapt? Do you want to recreate and draw students right into the CS50 experience by recreating all of the lecture demos and sort of the flashier moments of the course? Do you want to recreate it live? And we're seeing quite a mix of that. About half of our teachers are adopting, about half of our teachers are adapting, and some are adopt-apting, mixing it all together. So we have lots of different implementations, and we have a teacher network that we've established so teachers can communicate with one another, develop best practices that we can then incorporate back into the course. And it's sort of this great feedback loop that allows us to continually improve what we're doing. So here are just a couple of pictures from our workshops where we have, these are all of our pilot teachers. So this was from our first workshop in Redmond in 2015. You've seen this picture before, but this was in Cambridge last year as well. Here again in Cambridge, this was earlier this spring, and our DC group, and and when we just came from in London as well. And then lastly, you've seen all the teachers, but I wanted to share a video that our production team put together from an event for our CS50 AP students. So as David mentioned, we had a hackathon in February with 8 schools from the New York City area that are piloting the course, 4 of them public, 4 of them private. And we had a chance to conduct some interviews and put together this video about what CS50 AP is all about from the student perspective.
CS50 AP is probably the most rigorous implementation of the AP Computer Science curriculum, the College Board curriculum for the AP exam coming up next year. What I love about it is that it teaches you not just about coding, but about computer science through the lens of coding in C.
As a high school computer science teacher, I absolutely love the CS50 curriculum. I think they have done an absolutely incredible job of taking real computer science topics and making it so accessible.
For me, CS50 is a very accessible and rigorous program.
The interactive content that has been weaved into this curriculum is really effective for high school students. I find that they really benefit from the activities live in the classroom, and I'm really enjoying the hands-on component myself.
I've been in the CS50 program at my school, and we've been programming, since the beginning of the year, and we've been progressing through the problem sets. And they're all extremely interesting and extremely rewarding once you finally, get your program to compile successfully and execute.
Like coding didn't think it wasn't something that I thought that I would enjoy. But after CS50, I realized that there's so much more to coding than what I initially thought.
We get to code, we get to, make these problems, make a calculator, make different types of useful problems and algorithms that can be beneficial to us in the world, and it's a gift.
Curricularly, technologically, and more, CS50 AP is identical to CS50 at Harvard. What's fundamentally different, of course, is the schedule according to which the course operates. So indeed, CS50 AP is an adaptation of CS50's own syllabus and schedule to essentially a 36-week curriculum that frankly is a wonderful opportunity for students to dive into far more detail on certain topics and also give the high school teachers a great number of opportunities to inject ideas and material of their own so that rather than simply adopt CS50, they're adapting it and integrating into it their own ideas, visions, experiments, problem sets, and more.
So I think what I love about the curriculum is that it gives me the flexibility to use the time in class the way that I choose to. I could show video in class if I had a sub, but if I want to teach the content myself, I can, and I choose differently depending on what it is that I want the kids to get across.
The kids are learning C, which for a lot of people can be really intimidating because when they think of C, they think of a very low-level, no-object language, which is true for a lot of people when they develop it professionally. However, Professor Malin has done an incredible job packaging it in a way that is so friendly for a new developer.
I think it actually made me understand the fundamentals of how everything actually works a lot better, and I think that really was very gratifying and made me appreciate it a lot more.
When we did the Visionaire and the Caesar ciphers, I really felt like I was a real computer scientist.
We're a little conflicted when they first saw C, but once they got the hang of it and they got into the syntax, they really enjoyed the challenge of problem solving. And I've been hearing such really interesting feedback about it. It really helps the kids think, how it's been helping them in their math class, and overall just a really positive experience.
C is a great place to be because it's kind of a foundational language for so many other things that have come after it.
For some time, CS50 has been available as open courseware, whereby all of the course's materials and tools are freely available, but we haven't to date focused as nearly as much on teachers. And indeed, CS50 AP has ultimately been about not only connecting with students and providing them with that same range of tools and curricula and opportunities, but also to provide all the more of a support structure for teachers in the high school system so that they can work more intimately, more closely, and more proximally to their own students and provide exactly the kind of support structure that we're fortunate to be able to provide in Cambridge and New Haven and now beyond. My name is David Malin, and this is CS50 AP. So what's been especially exciting are some of the synergies with DCE. For instance, we have, by nature of being an online course for all these years, a built-in training program for teachers. And indeed, our expectations generally are for our high school teachers, if they are interested in adapting or adopting the course in some form, is to simply take Computer Science E-50, the version of CS50 through DCE. We now offer it in a mixed format so that you can do the first half in the fall and the second half in the spring, much like Henry's E10 has been offered for some time. Similarly, we been working closely with Carol's group on the workshops themselves and certification therefore. And then finally, thanks to our friends from Microsoft, have we also begun to be able to provide some of our teachers with scholarships so that they can enroll in the course, benefit from the local support structure of teaching fellows and feedback weekly on problem sets, while simultaneously not having to worry as much about the tuition that they might not be able to handle themselves for their own local school system. We thought we'd give you one final glimpse before we depart on our biggest technological push this summer especially. We are aspiring this coming year to provide students not only with CS50 CS50 4K or 30K, but also with all the more of an immersive opportunity, especially for students for whom socioeconomically or geographically or academically they could never actually travel to a place like Harvard, actually sitting in on a classroom like Sanders Theater, and to the best of our ability, if virtually, give them an approximation of the experience of what it's like to take a class at a place like Harvard or at a place like Yale. And you might have noticed in the media of late that very popular is virtual reality or VR, where you put on some admittedly socially silly looking goggles on your eyes, but the result, thanks to a digital screen that's right there before your eyes, is complete immersion, especially when you then put on headphones. And one of our goals is to capture not only the experience of being in Sanders, but over the coming years to also figure out technologically and educationally how can this technology be leveraged to create, even for local students, a superior educational opportunity by way of CS50 VR.
All right, so I think David called it a push, but I would call it a challenge. This is a very new space to be entering into. And I'm just curious, as a show of hands, how many people have actually put on either the Gear VR or some other goggles like this? Yeah, the Oculus, the Vive? Okay, a few, so we got about half in the room. If you haven't seen it, come down at the end. We'll power these guys up. You can actually see what our trailer looks like, and you'll be transported to Sanders Theater yourself. But what it looks like is, for our experiments, we've been using a 6 GoPro rig. And this is the output. You take each GoPro and you stitch them together and project them against a sphere. And what you get is this distorted view, and it's kind of like normal-ish in the middle, and then the outsides, you can see the top and bottom get really distorted, but the software stitches it back together and tracks your head motion, so as you look around, you get the feeling like you're in the theater, and it's really quite compelling. The cheapest implementation of this on the viewer side is Google Cardboard, and even the iPhone now, you can pop any video into Google Cardboard mode, pop it into these glasses, and put it up to your face, and the gyroscopes and sensors in the actual phone will track with you, and it's really cool to watch. The next step up is the Gear VR, which we have here if you want to see. And this is, I think, a $600 unit. Does that include the cost of the phone? Yes, so including the phone. So for the students who are just getting these, like a lot of people who have the Samsung phones are actually getting these, so it would be trivial for them to pop into CS50. This is what the camera looks like that we've been experimenting with to date. This is certainly, if you've used GoPros before, I'm sure the production team here knows what I'm talking about. They're very difficult to use, they're very unreliable, so we've been trying to figure out another way to solve this problem. We're very hopeful for this camera coming out called the Aura. It's a camera that kind of does a lot of the stitching for you. You're able to live stream from it, and then you can get the raw assets and stitch them together yourself. Because one of the hardest things about this technology right now is that stitch point where you have the two cameras converge is very difficult to get right, depending on what depth you're trying to see people at, how close people are to the camera, and that kind of thing. We thought about this. We decided not to. And then the other camera that we're trying to get our hands on is the Nokia Ozo, and this is a kind of all-in-one solution as well. It hooks up to a Mac Pro in real time and does a stitch for you, and again, you get the raw assets at the end. You can do your own stitch. Ian has been taking the lead on playing with Nuke. Do you want to?
Sure. So we've experimented with a few different stitching softwares, AutoPano, Video Stitch, and sort of right at the right moment, Nuke, which is a compositing software for Hollywood special effects and things like that, came out with a beta version of VR tools, and so we've been running our footage through all three tools, and they all have their pluses and minuses. I think by far Nuke has the best look. It just takes 3 days to render 3 minutes of it, so it's sort of unsustainable. And then we're sort of at this point settling on what the best tools are, and it's very new, and they're all they're improving weekly, essentially. Like a new software version will come out, and it will have faster render times or better computation and things like that. So it's a very interesting time to be playing around.
For sure. And we thought it would be fun to have. Let me introduce Connor Doyle, one of our undergraduates who is our VR expert, come down with the Ricoh Theta. Ricoh Theta S, and this is a new camera. We thought we'd take a fun group picture here. This is going to be a 360 picture, which you can go on Facebook and actually turn your phone and see this space. Everybody smile.
3, 2, 1.
All right, we got it. So very shortly we'll upload that to Facebook, and if you want to see what the effect is in a still image, you can see. And the cool thing about this camera is it has a very low price point, does a pretty nice stitch. It's only got 2 lenses, so your 2 stitch points are you can put them off to the side so that they don't overlap as much, and it's very convenient to upload directly to YouTube and Facebook, and we're planning on taking this around to shoot a bunch of stills and have some fun. I'll hand it back over to David.
Yeah, happy to take any questions in our remaining couple of minutes. Anything at all, AP-wise, production-wise, software-wise, nothing at all. Yes? Locally, no. We'd like to think that if they want to experience Sanders Theater, they'll come to Sanders Theater. It's a good question. We don't know yet, and this is so nascent, the technology itself and our experience with it. We really don't know what to expect. What our current aspirations are is to mail something like the Samsung Gear to each of our high school teachers initially, so that we can achieve a sort of network effect so that each of our 40 teachers can then hand it around to some 1,500 plus students, at least in our current pilot phase. Google Cardboard is nice because whereas the Samsung Gear, besides a $600 phone that you might personally own, is just $99, which is high, but not atrociously high, there's Google Cardboard, which is like $10 per. And what we're hoping to do is, some of you might recall receiving from like the New York Times branded version of Google Cardboard. We hope to do something more like that on scale to our CS50X students. I do think that our initial push, our initial challenge with this will be certainly a little gimmicky in terms of where the hardware is at. I mean, as some of you have experienced, I mean, it feels silly. It's not necessarily sustainable on your nose for an hour long. But for us, it's a proof of concept, and where I think things get really exciting, especially in high school classrooms, if you can transport a student to some other place or transport a teacher into a student space. Indeed, on the horizon for 2017 will be CS50 AR, or augmented reality, whereby you'll be able to see through the lens and not only see people like this out in the audience, but some sort of Princess Leia style overlay from Star Wars, so that you actually inject digital assets into your physical world. As to what problems we'll solve, we're not sure just yet. So this is by far one of our most experimental pushes. And I joke that students would just come to Sanders, but that's a lot easier said than done. So who knows how many of them might in the dorms benefit from this as well these days.
And we're also experimenting a lot. One of the things Connor's really diving into this summer is like the other experiences that we can create beyond just lecture capture. And so there's a lot of excitement around that as well.
Any other questions we can field? Yeah, in back.
Collaboration between students that take the course remotely, do you see, or how do you facilitate that outside of like a workshop, like online, or how does that work?
So at least in the AP setting, what's actually been really interesting is because of the teacher network that we've established, having classrooms collaborate when teachers are going through at the same schedule. We actually have one of our pilot teachers is in Mexico, and and they were going through the course at about the same speed as a teacher who is in Michigan, I think. And they actually paired off their students collaboratively, so that they turned one of the assignments into a collaborative assignment with one student from Mexico and one student from Michigan working on the assignments together, which was pretty interesting. And I think that there's a lot of that organic connection between students that happens not just in AP, but through affinity groups, I guess, that sort of form where students are both taking the class, they're both in the same metro area, and they get together. So I think it happens organically, but it's certainly starting to happen on a more structured basis without necessarily our intervention in the AP field.
One of the benefits of our IDE being online as well is that it's completely on the web, and so very much like using Google Docs, for example, where you can simultaneously across the world edit a single document. You can do the same thing with programming now using Cloud9. And so we have seen students do this for effectively online pair programming, where two students on other sides of the world can work on the same program at the same time. We can use this locally as well for two students that just want to work on the same project that are in proximity to each other.
You want to talk about the puzzle day for CS50X students?
Oh yeah, and then one of the things I didn't talk about during the AP session was CS50 is also known for having several events throughout the year. We have our puzzle day to start off the semester, we have our hackathon near the end of the semester, and we have the CS50 fair where students exhibit projects. And last year we opened, we did puzzle day a second time. We came up with a set of puzzles and introduced them to our CS50X audience and facilitated collaborations from all over the world. So we encourage people to get into groups of teams. We put together a Google spreadsheet for people who didn't have team members nearby, and we ended up with several teams. Christian was on one of the teams where you had 4 different team members from around the world, and they were all collaborating at the same time. And yeah, the CS50X audience being so global has really created this interesting network of students.
And as our climactic ending, I'm not sure it will work on everyone's phones, but thanks to Connor, we have already uploaded the photo that we just took to this URL here. As best I can tell, if you have a laptop, it opens well. If you have a phone, at least an iPhone, it opens, but it, what's that? Oh, let's just open it on here. Why don't we use this large projection screen we have here to show you the net effect. We'll send around the URL, and what's actually cool is if you have the Facebook app on your Android or iPhone, you can actually hold your phone around and look around, ideally in some other room, and experience what it was like to be in this room here. And I think I saw at least one tongue sticking out if we pan. So this, of course, is just a single moment in time, but with VR, will students with those headsets be able to, as though they're in Sanders, look up, down, left, right, and as an hour-long lecture plays, actually look around and experience what it's like to be in a space like that, or, as we have sample footage from as well, our CS50 Fair in New Haven at Yale. So thank you so much. Thanks to Amy for organizing. We'll stick around for demos.